And here we are. Welcome back to the Retro Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your host, Andy and CD. What is going on is episode 57 of the podcast. We're talking offseason. We're talking transfer portal. We're continuing to talk coaching carousel. I did not expect us to be talking coaching carousel. What's the date of this date that we're recording this? January 29th. I did not expect to continue talking about it, but here we are. There's a new hire just the other day. So, and including two more that we hadn't got to either. We'll be sure to get to all those, as well as 8 guys in the transfer portal that we haven't looked at that we said we wanted to look at. So we're going to talk about it. So, CD, what's going on?
Not much, like you said, like happy you're talking almost breaking news in college football. Not often do you get that in January, at the end of January, right? We have signing day coming up, like the second signing day or the real signing day, whatever you want to call it, coming up soon here. But yeah, it's coaching carousel and transfer portal. College football never sleeps, and neither do we. You know the saying, we never sit out. And yeah, I'm excited to get into this. We got some three very interesting coaching moves, right? Late in the cycle. How are the candidate pools? What happened there in continuity and change? It's all very new and very different. And obviously, it's different than it's ever been in college football, but we're excited to talk about it and excited you guys will listen in on this.
Yeah, and be sure, look, if you like the content, like the video, right? It's a very easy rule that we have here. Okay. Also consider subscribing as well. We keep going up, ticker keeps going up, and we've loved it. Your support has been absolutely invaluable to this process for us. We thrive off of that. We thrive off of it. So make sure if you like this content, right? I'm gonna assume you're gonna like our other content as well. You can check out our other coaching videos and our other transfer portal videos as well on our channel. Those are in playlist, so you can check those out. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you so much for that as well. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating if you really, really like us. And be sure to give us a follow on Spotify as well. Share it with your friends and family. So, all right. With that being said, are you ready to get into this?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk Sharon more. Yeah, it's January, late January, and we have a new coach at a gigantic program. And you know what? This did not start. There was a chance, right? There was rumors that maybe O'Brien Kelly, right? You thought that we all thought it was a pretty good chance that it was Sharon Moore, right? He did a great job as a replacement. You already have the national championship like culture in that room, right? Do everything you can to keep what you got. But there was a chance that this could have set off a new chain reaction, and we would have been talking about more coaching carousel. So it seems like this is the final like leg of, unless there's any other coaches that decide to take NFL jobs, like maybe Chip Kelly. I don't know. He might do that. But needless to say, I liked the hire a lot. I thought this should have been your 1A option for sure. Dude's 37 years old. He's been with Michigan since 2018. He had experience in Central Michigan as well, Louisville before that as well. He's an offensive lineman. I like offensive line coaches. I like defensive players that turn out to be head coaches, and I like offensive line head coaches. I do. I like toughness and I like grit. And you know what? It's a different perspective. And he knows what's important. And he knows building in the offensive line and the defensive line is very important. Very important. So to review what he did on offense this year, it was nothing short of spectacular. They won a national championship with Sharon Moore at the helm, running the offense. They're 12th in the country in points per game, first in scoring margin. They were top 20 in first half points per game, top 20 in second half points per game. They were a top 5 team in fourth down conversion rate. They were a top 20 team in third down conversion rate. Their yards per attempt passing wise was very efficient. They ran the ball good enough. He did a really good job. I imagine you have some thoughts on the Shire.
Yeah, no, I like you said, this was 1A for them. And I think what validates that not only was his performance in the field, his value as a recruiter and a developer at positions of need and almost the identity of the roster. You mentioned the O-line, you mentioned the physicality that he brings to a conference and to a team that really needed that a couple of years ago, but totally revamped their identity and obviously has dominated the Big Ten ever since. Yeah, Shromore is a great hire. And who knows that better than the Michigan athletic department, than the Michigan staff and the players. Everybody, I'm sure, gave his approval, including Jim Harbaugh. If you're good enough for all those guys, after having a couple season long interview, right? Even though he is younger, like you said, he doesn't have a ton of experience at the Power Five level, or coaching in general. I mean, his first job was a GA at Louisville back in 2009, right? If you remember those Charlie Strong teams, like that, this has been a pretty meteoric rise. You mentioned, or it's similar to obviously, and it will always be compared to the program of Ohio State and Ryan Day when he took over for a guy, a legend like Urban Meyer, a very successful program that it was in the same its own right. And also now you're passing it down, Jim Harbaugh to Sharon Moore here after you win national championships. Very, very distinct company to be taken over as a national championship as a new coach in the following year. I mean, we mentioned it was back in the 90s when Nebraska did it. It's very hard. I'm sure Sharon Moore is feeling the pressure. I'm sure Michigan fans are nervous and anxious for a lot of reasons, but I do think this hire, not only in the short term, keeps the roster and the fan base together and that culture together that did so much success for you, but also long term with I think his upside as a recruiter, which I'll get into a little bit later, can really also elevate this program or continue to keep this program elevated at the top of the Big Ten, at the top of college football, where that big blue belongs.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. One thing I'll say that was really big, and we mentioned this briefly off air before the show started. They lose their strength and conditioning coach. He's headed to San Diego, or not San Diego. Oh my goodness, what am I? My dad. Did I? Well, I did. We did grow up watching the San Diego Chargers. We are old enough
Mm.
to grown up watching Philip Rivers sling the pill over there. But he heads over to Los Angeles for the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. That I think is a huge factor, man. Like there are a couple strength and conditioning coaches like that you look at in the country, and based on the programs, right? Like how do you perform based on the talent level that you're recruiting in high school? And Michigan has outperformed. Schools like Iowa have outperformed. Schools like Washington have outperformed. Point to those strength and conditioning staffs, that culture in that weight room. That is a big that is a big deal. That is a big deal. So, and they're gonna get a top tier guy, right, to come in there and replace whatever that was that they had, and I'm sure it'll be fine. But it, I can't imagine it'll be the same, right? I can't imagine it'll be the same.
No, this is massive. I mean, if you've ever been around a program or a football or in general college football, like strength and conditionings, yes, the X's and O's aren't there, but in terms of like the 9 months, the beauty of football we talked about a lot of times is like you practice so much, you have all off season just for a couple games on a couple Saturdays in the fall, right? A lot of times these coaches, yes, they can work X's and O's, they can watch film, they can work on technique all year, but the main people that have them, these players all throughout the off season is the strength staff. And that the fourth quarter program at Alabama and Scott Cochran was made famous in college football circles because of how tough it was and because you saw them dominate teams in the second half of the season and also in games, in big time games. They had the juice and the energy. We saw in Michigan a lot of times this year, just being physically dominant for the past couple of years, like you mentioned, and obviously big time below. I'm sure the Chargers are welcome to have him along with Jesse Minter, another very good defensive coordinator, defensive mind. We talked about him last episode with Jim Harbaugh leaving potentially, and obviously everything going on there with the Ravens and John Harbaugh and that little pipeline they've had with Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter now. So now we'll see what he does at D coordinator there and strength coach staff. It sounds like they're hiring from within, right? They're just promoting the assistant strength coach to be the top strength coach there, which is obviously good to keep continuity there. So we'll see if he can continue that motivation and work ethic that they've had for so long now.
Yeah, keeping continuity there, huge, huge for this program. So I like that hire. But before we give grades, we got to give expectations, right? What are the expectations for the program in Michigan? To me, it's complicated because Michigan does not recruit at the level that Ohio State does. They do
Well, okay,
not.
here's what I want to ask you real quick. I want to give you your expectation. Now we kind of change it up on you a little bit. Put you on the spot here. Is yes, give me the expectation of wins per year in the new Big Ten, the new college football playoff era. But I also want to hear what you think they're going to recruit at, what the level you think they're going to recruit at, because they've been like when Harbaugh first got there, they were consistently in the top six, top seven. Remember, they signed guys like Rashawn Gary and Jabril Peppers, big time classes early in Michigan. Didn't quite produce Big Ten championships like the last couple classes have, which have been in the early teens, right, and kind of lower than you'd expect at a program like Michigan. I think part of that is due to Harbaugh's flirting with the NFL and how hard is it to sign with a guy like that, and how much recruiting is he doing on National Signing Day when he's literally taking an interview on National Signing Day, which is crazy in its own right. Still won a national championship. Michigan fans don't care. I'm sure they're loving it, no matter what the results. But yeah, I want to ask your recruiting expectations and also maybe if that translates to your different win totals, I guess.
My expectations if they're actually going to recruit at a better level, like for all the reasons that you just mentioned, Sherman Moore is a good recruiter. Jim Harbaugh was flirting with the NFL a bunch. And they're coming off a national championship win. Like they might lose some talent in the transfer portal. I mean, as we're recording today, not a lot I think is in the transfer portal. Most of the draft. We're gonna have 11 or 12 guys drafted this year. So wow. But I think the recruit better. I think the wins. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Not right away for sure. 9 to 10 wins is what I look at. Like my expectations for them is to compete for Big Ten championships and have playoff appearances, like being contention for a playoff appearance every year, right? I'm not saying they should win the national championship every year or should be competing for a national championship every year. I mean, if you're competing for a playoff spot and you make the playoffs, you're competing for a national championship, but not every team is actually competing for a national championship every year when they think they are. I don't know. I like my expectation is competing for Big Ten championships, competing for playoff spots.
Yeah, no, I think that's what this has to be. The standard can't really change that much. Is it fair to expect Jerome Moore to do it? Like they've lost one Big Ten game in the last 3 years, right? They beat Ohio State 3 straight years, been in the playoffs 3 straight years. I think with the new Big Ten, it's going to get harder. You have Ohio State clicking on all cylinders this offseason, it seems like, right? You hit lightning in a bottle with a couple of recruiting classes and coaching staffs, right? That's very hard to replicate. You saw how hard it is to win a national championship, right? It took you 3 years to get there. You won in overtime in the Rose Bowl, and then you beat Washington, obviously. So yeah, I don't think if he doesn't win a national title in his first 3 4 years, I don't think he's a bust at all. Like you mentioned, compete for national championships or compete for college football playoff berths and Big Ten championships. And guess what, Sharon Moore, you're following an era where Jim Harbaugh just beat Ohio State 3 straight times. Your expectation is going to be beating Ohio State, right? Fair or unfair, right? That's going to be the expectation there at Michigan, as it is for Ryan Day right now. Is he? And here's the deal: like, if he turned out to be Ryan Day, who, by the way, is 56-8, right? I think that is a tremendous success. No matter what happens, he's a bounce of the ball here and there from winning a couple national titles, right? So I don't think this is that big a. I don't think comparing him, if he lives up to Ryan Day, is a bad at all. I'm sure Michigan fans won't want to hear that, but that's what I kind of see this as, where you're kind of a guy elevated from within to be chosen as a successor, taking over from a successful program and a successful head coach, obviously, Jim Harbaugh and Urban Meyer. But yeah, I like you mentioned 9 to 10. You got to be closer to more 10-win seasons than 9-win seasons. I think has to be the expectation there after what you've done recently, fair or unfair, right? Like I guess fairly, I think 9, 9, 10 wins. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be really hard, and we'll see if it gets. We'll see what happens to win totals and to like how we view a 9-3 team in one of those Power Two conferences and how that changes in the next couple of years because of how hard the schedules are, because of going on the road, going to travel Eugene, going to California for those schools, going out to Seattle, play Washington. I think it's going to be harder than it ever has been. And so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I'm going to go expectation. I think you hit on the head. 9, 10 wins is pretty realistic and also like stern.
We talk about giving a coach an A means that they're going to exceed expectations. A B, they meet expectations. C, they do not meet expectations. I'll give the higher B plus. I think he can exceed expectations, but I think he will meet expectations. I think he will win 9 to 10 games a year. I think he can absolutely do that. I think he can recruit at a high level. I think he can win ball games as long as he keeps, that culture inside that building. If he finds a way to keep that there, he's a young guy too. I mean, like, I don't know if this is his final destination. Like, if like, meaning would he take a job anywhere? He's an Oklahoma grad. I don't know that he would take the Oklahoma job. I don't know if there are any other jobs that he would actually physically take over this job. What's crazy is that this is a 5-year, $27 million deal for a program that just won a national championship. That is dirt cheap. Like dirt cheap.
but hey,
Paying five
you have to reallocate those resources into beefing up whatever you have to do. I'm not going to say NIL because it's not technically NIL, but whatever you have to do to get an elite coaching staff, elite training staff, all the programs and the resources you need to have a massive recruiting staff and an army of just elites, just killers on the recruiting trail, bodies everywhere, analysts everywhere, whatever you need, like you mentioned, that has to be made up somewhere because you can't just be the Michigan Athletic Department and be like, hey, we got a guy for a steal, right? Let's pocket the money.
half
No,
half
no,
of the price.
you
Half of the
have to
price of what he should
push.
be getting. Like
You have to push.
he's getting half of what he should be getting paid.
Yeah, yeah.
Now
It's
he hasn't done anything yet, but like the way that these other coaches are going, like if they were to pay Brian Kelly would be getting paid 11, $12 million a year. If you
oh
were to pull
yeah.
him out of LSU, he would be
Well,
getting
that's
paid 11, $12 million a year.
and you're saving money on a buyout tue because you'd have to buy Brian Kelly out. You have to buy out whoever
Yes.
else you would have wanted to, right? Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. So yeah, but I don't want to paint this as like a financial saver, and that's why they did it. I think this is
No,
like
no,
it made
but
sense.
benefits. Those are
Yep.
benefits. This is a good hire, guys.
Yeah, to follow up you, I think B plus is right where I see it. Right where I see it. I do think yes, like Michigan has been on top of the college football world the past couple of years, right? They're probably in your top 3 or 4, depending on what you want to say in terms of programs the past couple of years. Um, but let's be honest, it's been a tough couple decades, right? With Rich Rod, the Lloyd Carr years were pretty up and down. Brady Hoke, obviously, a very disappointing kind of season. And even the early Jim Harbaugh days, yes, they were good, but they also were disappointing at some times. He couldn't beat Michigan State and Ohio State until 2021. And then obviously everything clicked and it worked out for him. I would say yes, because the program has been humming doesn't mean it just will continue to hum. I do think give Sharon more patience. I don't want to like say temper your expectations because at a program like Michigan, you shouldn't have to. But the reality of it is like it's getting harder to win in the Big Ten, and your recruiting hotbed is a little bit different than down south. If you're Georgia and Texas, Florida, even Alabama, right? Programs like that. And so it's harder. Now, obviously, that big blue, the big yellow M, the maize and blue, right? Like that is obviously a national brand, and that can help you recruit nationally, which I think Sherrone will take to his advantage. And obviously, being in the national championship, being in the college football playoffs, having all the respect and notoriety and national attention will help you for sure in improving that and improving recruiting and doing everything you need to maintain this level of success. I would just say caution your expectations for Sherrone Moore. Don't run out a really good coach because he's young and because he isn't living up to Jim Harbaugh's last 3 years at Michigan. Like don't do that to him because it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. Yeah. B plus to me.
Let's go to San Jose State. They just hired Ken. Listen to this. Ken Niumatalolo. That is his name. Ken Niumatalolo. If you remember, he was a coach at Navy for a number of very, very successful years for the midshipmen.
Oh,
So
midshipman. Tough job to
it,
win. Tough job to win.
very,
Very
very
impressive
tough.
plays.
Two very, very different jobs, though, San Jose State and Navy. Now,
But similar in the fact that they're both tough jobs. San Jose State
yes,
is still a pretty tough job, which is why I think he's the right guy for it. Sorry.
historically,
Yeah.
historically, it is a tough job. I believe that you can win there.
Yeah.
And Brent Brennan, to some degree, showed that you could be successful there. Now, that is a program. San Jose State does not have a large athletic budget at all. It does not. But you got a great geography. These last couple of years, you've had some nice momentum. You've brought in some good quarterbacks the last couple of years. It should be interesting. So before San Jose State, Niumatalolo was at UCLA, just as like a tight ends coach, I believe. Then before that, of course, he was at Navy for, I mean, a number of years. We're talking like 3 seasons where he had over 10 wins at Navy. He went to 11 different bowl games, 6 wins in those bowl games. Incredibly successful. Yeah, like, did he have a tough time winning down the stretch there? Yes. Yes. But what NIL does does Navy have to offer? What elite wide receivers are going to want to come play for Navy? You know, it's just it's such a difficult job. It is such a difficult job coaching at a military school, what Troy Calhoun does. It's unbelievable. We were talking about before the show. How many Mountain West coaches got fired or left this past offseason?
I believe there's going to be what, six? One, two, three, four, five, six current packed Mountain West coaches that will be changes in this offseason. We have done six videos, and then also Fresno State still has to hire a coach. That's seven. If you want to throw Oregon State in the mix, that's eight. Eight. That's over a half of the Mountain West, and an already crazy and wild Mountain West, which we loved covering this year. A lot of turnover, a lot of change there. Someone's going to rise to the top. You mentioned it with Sun Belt, right? With James Madison and Troy and South Alabama now changing coaches, right? Someone's going to rise to the top. Is it going to be Barry Odom, UNLV? Ken Neil Matalolo, or anyone else in the conference there? I think it's very exciting for a lot of these fan bases.
Absolutely. And Nimalolo, he's a Hawaiian, Polynesian. He has these West Coast ties. So he knows what it's like. I mean, he was just coaching at UCLA, right? He knows what it's like to coach in the state of California. He was at UNLV for a couple of years. He wins, right? And you're probably wondering, is he going to be running the same triple option offense that we're used to running at Navy? No. CD, I'll let you get into that a little bit. What is this offense going to look like?
Yeah, so it's going to be the Spread and Shed. By the way, fantastic name. That's done by the OC will be Craig Stutzman. Craig Stutzman's a guy that's had a lot of success wherever he's been. Most
A
recently at
ton.
Texas State. Developed some damn good quarterbacks. The resurgence of TJ Finley himself, a guy we love talking about on the podcast this year. He's going to do great things. I believe at Western Kentucky this year. Um, yeah, he's a guy. They passed the ball 429 times. It's going to be much different than Navy's triple option spread and even some of Brent Brennan's stuff that he ran at San Jose State. He mentioned why he's not running it is because, first of all, the Bay Area, right, where San Jose State is and California itself, recruiting resources and hotbed is for a ton of good quarterbacks and strong skill position players, right? That is exactly what you want and the awareness of your coach. Not, hey, I'm not gonna put my scheme and implement it my scheme on this program. I'm gonna see what this program needs at the time right now. It's fantastic. It is fantastic. Their former OC is going to be returning as their wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator, helping on with that. Um, he's bringing over some Navy ties, right? So the slot backs coach was similar to the running back or the wing back in the Navy triple option offense. He'll coach running backs. That's Marcus Thomas, and the former fullbacks coach for Navy, the guy that just gets the fullback dive every time in the triple option play. That Mike Judge, he'll be the tight ends coach, right? Younger brother of Craig Stutzman, right? Billy Ray Stutzman, and the connection there between Craig Stutzman and Coach Ken, was Billy Ray Stutzman. Follow me here. The brother of Craig Stutzman, right, was a former assistant of Coach Ken at Navy. He's also going to be an analyst there to bring some continuity with the Navy staff, with Texas State and Craig and all that good stuff offensively. It's a pretty exciting staff for what the resources he has there, but all of his connections you mentioned on the West Coast and in recruiting in general, and also in Navy and college football world is paying off, and that's why you hire a guy like Ken.
So we talk about what are the expectations? What are the expectations of the San Jose State Spartans? In the past, it had been what 7 wins would be like an amazing season, at least in the last like 15 years. I don't have the past season results in front of me, but and when they went 7-1 and won the Mountain West champion, like that was their only conference championship in that program's history. And it was during COVID. So to say this program has been lacking success would be pretty accurate. But I think right now, with the state of the program where it's at, I I think you can expect as a fan to compete to potentially make a bowl game every year, right? Like hovering around that 5, 6 wins every single year. And occasionally you get a quarterback, you win a couple games that you shouldn't, and all of a sudden, in some weird, crazy tiebreaker that actually screwed them this past year, you might end up in the Mountain West championship game, and then you have a chance. Then you have a chance. I don't anticipate a team like San Jose State making the playoffs anytime soon or competing for that G5 spot. But man, I think there's potential with this team, and I like Coach Ken. So I don't know. What are your expectations for this team? Not necessarily this team, but like this program for the future with Ken.
Yeah, to be honest, and let's be real, like a place like San Jose State, like your out of conference matters in setting your expectations for that season, right? We talked about San Jose State this year. We loved their surgeons in October and November. They had a brutal gauntlet of September. Not only did they open week 0 against Caleb Williams and the reigning Heisman Trophy winner at USC, they also had to play Oregon State and Toledo, one of the best G5 programs there is out there. Toledo, obviously very talented in their own right. They almost went to Toledo and almost won there with Brent Brennan's staff. I do think it matters. In 2024, it opens up a little bit more, right? You have Sacramento State and you have Kennesaw State. By the way, newly FBS Kennesaw State, get used to that in the Conference USA. And then also Washington State and Stanford, two teams who are not obviously uber talented, but still Power Five teams or former Power Five teams in their own right. But again, not impossible to win, but also like you probably won't be favored in those games. There's unique challenges at San Jose State, but there was also unique challenges with Navy and with Coach Ken there and all the success he had. In terms of the program win, sorry to finally get to that answer. Yeah, I think 4 to 5 is probably my expectation for them. Wins depending on your
That's
out of conference
understandable.
schedule. I think leaned more over to 5 in terms of like what I expect. If he is winning at an average of 5 wins per year, let's say he's making a bowl game every other year or every third year, right? 2 out of 3 years, 2 out of 4 years. I think that's good enough to save his job and hopefully popping with a good out of conference schedule. And then also there is that every time we do a G5 program, right? In this coaching carousel, I'm going to continue to bring up there is an automatic bid for G5 teams. Right? If you get the right out of conference schedule and you beat one good-ish Power 5 team, and then you run the table in your conference, you have a real shot at making that. Now, I don't want to put on too unfair, lofty expectations for Niama Talolo and staff here at San Jose State, but I do think like it's something to mention. Not that it's an expectation, or I would be shocked if it happened. Very happy for the program and the Trojans, but yeah, I do think I'm sorry, the Spartans. I'm
Spartans.
so sorry. My apologies there. Definitely not the Trojans, the Spartans. And yeah, this hasn't been great. Let's be honest here. And even Brent Brennan, it took him multiple years to get to that 5 to 7 win range. And as soon as he won 7 games multiple times in a row, some Power 5 team was calling his name, and because they know how impressive that was. And obviously, he built the staff, he built the program into a better spot than when he got it, which is good. And I think it's why they were able to go out and make a hire like this. That was actually pretty impressive. And I think a lot of people around in college football circles are pretty impressed with this hire. Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna say I'll finish at 5. I'll finish at 5.5.
Okay. I give this hire a B minus. And honestly, I think it would be lower than that if he didn't. I kind of have the bias of, him hiring Craig Stutzman. I I just feel weird. Like he's never been in charge of a program like this. He won a lot of games at Navy, and that's a tough program to win at. But my thought is that is a wildly different program to run and operate than this one. Wildly different. You just do things different. You do everything differently. So I think he knows how to work in a larger program. Right? He went to UCLA for a year. I think it'll just be a little different. So we'll see like how that adjustment can happen. But I think Craig Stutzman could be a guy, and he might save Niamatololo's butt a couple times these next couple years until he ends up getting a bigger job somewhere else. So, but it'll be interesting. So, by the way, when I say B minus, like again, A, exceeding expectations, B, meeting expectations, C, not meeting expectations. Telling you that like he's pretty much right there, going to be meeting expectations. But we'll see. Like Brent Brennan did a fantastic job with that program. He was barely scraping 7 wins. So let's just relax and enjoy the ride.
If he performs how you think he is in that B minus grade, right, where he's barely under expectations or not meeting them every single year, do you think his job is safe there?
No, even though it should be, even though it should be, because meeting expectations does not mean like you have to. in order for an AD to justify and donors to donate to certain programs, right, you have to sometimes make changes that you don't want to make, you
To
know,
give maybe a false sense of hope, you know.
to get a false sense of hope so donors can pony up and you can say, hey, look, we're doing all these things. Look at this. We're investing in the football program. Please donate to us. Like this is how we keep this thing alive. It'll be interesting. I think if he's not making bowl games consistently, I think he will not stay as that coach because I think the athletic department wants the expectation to be to make bowl games, and I don't blame them for wanting that. Don't blame them one bit.
Yeah, I'll spin in a little positive direction for our Spartan fans here. I do give this a B plus. I think he will meet expectations and exceed them more often than not. And I do think, um, he will 6 wins, bowl game type thing. I think that's going to be crucial for him and the success. I mentioned maybe the changing of the out of conference schedules and maybe the Mountain West changing a little bit. Who knows what's going to happen there? Yeah, I think he can really do it. And I go back to his ties at Navy, right? And I know you said yes, he hasn't done it at a place like San Jose State, but I also say like Navy is a, one or two, one or three kind of jobs, like the other Air Force or the other armed forces academies. So it's tough. It's really tough. And he won 11 games twice there with two different, entirely different rosters. That was super impressive in an American conference that I get is not the most, you know, fantastic, right? But it was pretty okay. You had Temple, who was pretty good back then. South Florida, Houston was really good. Back in those, I believe that was, Tom Herman's heights there at Houston. So I don't think it's pretty crazy to say and to be impressed with what he did there at Navy, and then also his ties to the West Coast. He grew up, graduated at University of Hawaii, played quarterback there, coached there for numerous years. Yes, they were back in the WAC back then, not in the Mountain West, but still, that I think that fact remains the same, and that still stands for my point in case here. Yeah, he's the all-time winningest coach in Navy, and to me, that's enough said. I do give it a little bit of boost because of how late it was in the cycle. If you're San Jose State, you survived most of the coaching cycle. You got through mid August or mid January, and you were feeling pretty darn good that you kept the guy like Brent Brennan for another year to build that program and continue to improve year by year, with his win totals and the success he's had in Mountain West. And then obviously Arizona comes and plucks him after the whole chain reaction of Saban getting retired, and obviously DeBoer going to Bama, and Arizona's coach going to Washington, Jed Fish, and obviously Brennan going over to Arizona. So yeah, I do think in a tough spot, in a pinch, they found the guy right across the street, and down in, I guess not that across the street, down in LA, being a guy for there, spent the year at UCLA, who's got a ton of connections and respect and name and in the game. And yeah, yes, you're losing some transfers in the short term, right? But you're also Nick Nash, all conference Mountain West guy, returned for you, withdrew from the portal. I'm sure he was excited about Sutsman and the new offense coming in and all the good stuff that Coach Ken is implementing there. So yeah, I think B plus is pretty fair. And I have a little bit more encouragement, I guess, than Matthew does. But regardless, it was an awesome year for them. And the Mountain West is going to be pretty hectic no matter what. He has a 5-year deal for him. So we'll see what he can get done.
Let's go to Buffalo. Let's talk Pete Lembo. I don't know that this was the guy that everyone expected to be head coach of Buffalo in 2024, but let me tell you something. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Pete Lembo, if you do not know, was special teams coordinator at South Carolina. The last few years, South Carolina has had, by far, on average, probably the best special teams in the entire country, which can account for their overachieving in the last couple of years, except for this past year with their offensive line, which is abysmal. But their special teams is what's kept them in games. It's what won them the game against, well, I guess Clemson. They kind of did a good job dominating that game, but they made some big time special teams plays in that game. I mean, they were fantastic. And you know what? It doesn't stop there either. He was at Memphis as well before. I don't know. Little kicker by the name of Riley Patterson was there that Pete Lembo was coaching, an NFL talent from a G5 school. No big deal. Oh, Pete Lembo at Rice. Yeah, I just coached Jack Fox. whatever, another NFL talent,
Massive
especially.
leg. You saw that in the playoff game the other day. That guy had a boot.
Yeah, just no big deal. Another special teamer. And of course, South Carolina, Kai Kroger might be in the NFL, if not this year, next year. Probably this year, right? Is he going to draft this year or is he staying one more year? I have no idea.
I guess he can.
Because he can. Maryland, he had a good special teams with. And let's talk about fit in the MAC as well. He was the head coach at Ball State before he went over to Maryland, Rice, Memphis, South Carolina, special teams coordinators there. He did a really good job at Ball State, and I think people will forget that, and they will just remember the last couple of years, and they'll be like, "Oh, that stinks." Pete Lembo is the only coach since 1994, 1994, let's say 94, to have a winning record after leaving Ball State. That's a tough program right there. And he won, did he win 10 games there? 9 games? He had a big time season one year. And that does not happen very often. So credit to Pete Lembo there. I like this a lot. He was at Elon and Lehigh as well. Coaching there. He did a good job both of those schools. I'm a huge fan of this hire because the number one thing you got to do when you are a lower tier program, and I mean lower tier in the sense you are not a Power Five program. You have to find either an innovative offense or you have to have just a great, well coached, disciplined team. Pete Lembo's not going to give you the innovative offense. All right. He's not going to do that for you, but he's going to have a disciplined, well conditioned, versatile, good team, a well coached team. That's what he's going to have. It's going to win you more games than it's going to lose you.
Yeah, and you mentioned that offense. I'll get into his staff a little bit. It comes from Dave Patenaude, right? A guy, if you're a Georgia Tech fan, I don't know if you love him, but you also remember that that was a tough job in a time where they transitioned from triple option to an actual spread offense, and he was the guy to do it with a team that was built for the triple option, and he had to play with players in a spread offense, and that was very tough. And they also improved significantly. They were starting a bunch of true freshmen, and obviously, didn't turn to wins and whatnot, but they also did pretty exciting, and it was a tough job for them. The past year, he was at Virginia being an analyst with none other than the Alex Colandrea. We love stud frisky player for Virginia. Yeah, I think it's really interesting hire there. For Pete Lembo, you mentioned how crucial it is to have, if you're gonna have Pete Lembo, right, a guy who's a motivator, good recruiter, developer, leader, guy like that, and not the X's and O's guys offensively, right? You have to nail your OC hire. And Dave Patton for Buffalo this late in the cycle is, I think, it's pretty darn good. You mentioned the Buffalo's program in general, like they've been ranked 3 times ever, and that was with a guy named Lance Leipold. And Lance Leipold is doing things at Kansas that nobody's ever done either. And he probably will have a head coaching job if he had one if he chose it, obviously. And obviously those won't continue to stop. What he's doing at Kansas is none other than just super super impressive. He had success at Buffalo. You bring in a guy like Mo Linquist, very impressive defensive mind, a guy that's had success in a lot of places. Wasn't quite working out at Buffalo. I don't think he was quite on the verge of being fired, but I do think his seat was pretty darn hot. He leaves for the Alabama co-defensive coordinator's job. So I guess that's two Buffalo coaches recently that have been hired away due to other jobs and I guess promotions. Which, if you're the AD at Buffalo, you have to be selling that to your boosters and to some alumni and your NIL program to be like, hey guys, like I'm I'm hitting pretty heavy here. Now the wins haven't been coming, I guess, recently, but with your help and your donation or whatever, we can, rise to the top of the MAC and whatnot. So yeah, I do think this is really interesting. The problem is they do have a pretty high endowment in the MAC. Now I don't know how much of that actually is focused on the football program there, and athletics there. So we'll see. But the Northeast also isn't super talented and deep, rich in high school recruiting wise, and so I do think
It's
it
not
does
deep.
hurt.
There's some good talent there. I think it's just not very deep. I think you're right to say it's not deep.
Yes, yes. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. And it's getting better for sure. I think less people are choosing to play the cross
New
and some other
Jersey,
sports. Yeah, so well, yeah, okay. Obviously, like Don Bosco, and there's like every year, Pennsylvania, I guess if you call it Northeast, every year there's top end guys, but also like Buffalo, it's not going to get those guys. And hey, to be honest, it is harder to find diamonds in the rough because people just get seen so much easier. Now the thing is also with that being said, with the transfer portal and the increased focus on that, and maybe taking away a couple stats taken away from their high school recruiting, you can have diamonds in the roughs fall through the cracks. And I think Buffalo can take advantage of that. A guy like Pete Lembo can be able to find and identify and recruit those guys to Buffalo, and obviously improving the talent of that program. So we'll see though.
Here's what I picture. When I watch, Maction, weeknight Maction, you see some interesting things in those games in regards to they're just they're not clean football games, right? They're not clean. I just picture Pete Lembo's Buffalo Bulls going, traveling up to Central Michigan, and just taking it to a team in the snow, not turning the ball over, playing good special teams, playing the field position game, finding ways to win games. That's what I picture. That's what I picture the Pete Lembo era being. Let me ask you this. Well, actually, to comment on your diamond in the rough, I mean, Buffalo's kind of nailed some players in the past. You had, Khalil Mack, that's a gem. You had Jared Patterson, that's a gem. Brandon Oliver, gem. James Starks, gem. Charlie Jones, who happened to be criminally underutilized by Lance Leipold, ironically. But here we are. I want to ask you, what are your expectations for this program moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, historically, in my opinion, I think making a bowl game just about every other year is going to keep your job. So I guess with that, I think 5.5, 6.5 wins is where you kind of have to set the expectation. To me, I do think, just the reality of the MAC and how hard it is to win there. Um, it's kind of where I'm seeing it at. So yeah, I don't know. I think you have to be competing with teams in the East Division. It's a little bit weaker, maybe top to bottom than the West Division. But also Miami and Ohio are pretty darn good, and Bowling Green's kind of cooking right now. Kent State's trying to, fix their course with Kenny Burns and whatnot. But I do think like you should be able to be close to a bowl game just about every other year, if not every 2 out of 3 years, for Buffalo there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is the expectation. And I think Pete Lembo exceeds it. Give me an A minus on this hire, Pete Lembo. Yep, shocked the world. I know everyone's like, what are you doing? Who is this Pete Lembo guy? This is a great hire, and I think he will coach good football teams because he's a good coach. I think he's gonna do it. And like you said, that East Division's a little bit weaker. Win 7, 8 games. Find yourself in a MAC championship every couple years. I don't know. Mess
Yeah.
around and find out. Let's go, Pete Lembo.
No, that's not ridiculous at all. I think that'd be awesome. I think Buffalo's probably pretty ecstatic to have a guy like him. Obviously, again, we keep talking about this late in the cycle. You didn't expect to be looking for a head coach in late January, but you are, and you found a guy that
Yeah.
was. And to me, what I look for when I see a coach or a player leave is like, okay, how do those players and fans like really feel about him, and like other coaches, right? Like on that staff, like how is the program? Is it getting worse by them leaving, right? And I think South Carolina is getting significantly worse by losing Pete Lembo, not only special teams wise, but culture wise and whatnot, recruiting. So I think you have to be excited about this for Buffalo. Yeah, I'm gonna go B plus here. I'm just hold my temper my expectations just a little bit. Even though I'm pretty darn excited about what it can do there in Buffalo and what they have done in the past, and maybe hit on another guy like Pete Lembo or like Lance Leipold. So yeah, I feel pretty good about it. He is a guy. How old is he? What is he?
It's like
50,
56.
56. So I don't know how many more jobs he wants to be able to take. So it's also like I guess 54. I guess if you hit on him, maybe you have him for a couple years until he rides off into the sunset, which I guess is a good thing for Buffalo.
I think this is an awesome hire. Let's get into the transfer portal talk. Let's start off hot. We're going to talk another Bama portal transfer. We're going to talk about Trey Amos. Amos. I don't care. All right. He's transferring to Ole Miss. What is this, his fifth year playing? He was at UAB, goes to Alabama. He actually won a lot of playing time late down the stretch. You saw him playing in that college football playoff game. There in the slot a lot. He played some boundary though too, right? I mean, he kind of played everywhere.
He played outside. Well, when I think McKinstry got hurt in against Georgia, he stepped in and made big time plays against him, and he kind of got picked on.
I don't know, but I know that you like him though. I know that you like him. Now this is a guy. Man, Ole Miss secondary, it could be pretty decent next year. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming Trey Amos finds his way on the field. If he can find his way on the field at Bama, he can find his way on the field at Ole Miss. Does
Yeah, the
Trey?
nice thing,
Is this a game breaker for Ole Miss? Is this just like a really good addition? Is this a nice depth piece? Is this like a good fit? Like, what is this? What do you see this as?
I think this is just a nice fit and a nice thing that to gel a lot of things in Ole Miss defense that completely got revamped in the portal. We've talked about a numerous amount of those guys transferring over to Ole Miss. He's a guy that's gonna you can play him in a couple different spots and he can just kind of excel in it. He's played meaningful SEC snaps. He's played a lot of college football. A guy with that experience and that talent is pretty valuable, right? It's pretty darn valuable. Was he 6'1", right? With a little bit of length, I guess probably
Yeah,
6 foot. Like that,
yeah,
that's important. And Bama could absolutely use him this year. And they needed him this past year, and he showed up big. So yeah, I don't think this is Jabbar Muhammad. This is one of those kind of transfers, a guy that's just, gonna be, first round pick next year, but who knows? But yeah, I do really like this. I think Bama's gonna hurt losing out on him. And obviously, um, Ole Miss is getting better with him.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Anytime too, you can make your opposing teams, you can weaken them and strengthen yourself at the same time. I mean, you're gonna take it every single time. We're gonna take it
Absolutely.
every single time. So yeah, it's another one of those secondary pieces where I mean, you how many are they losing? They're losing that entire secondary, right? There's not a single player on that secondary that's returning next year for
Um,
Alabama.
oh, well, yeah. I mean, Malachi Moore, I guess.
Oh, is he
But
back? Is this year number 6 for him?
I think it's five because this is his fourth year. Brian
Wow.
Burns was a junior. They were the same class in high school.
Malcolm Moore, he
But
was a true freshman in COVID, right? So 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. Yeah, this should be his 5th year. Wow.
and he's a guy that he's fired up to be there. But yeah, Amos is a guy that Bama misses for sure.
Let's talk about another Ole Miss transfer then. And another player from Alabama. Yam Banks, DB from South Alabama. We know South Alabama's Kane Womack went to Alabama to be the defensive coordinator for new head coach Kalen DeBoer. In his place, we Major Applewhite at South Alabama. Yam Banks said, "Adios, see you later." And instead of going to Alabama, he said, "I'm going to go to Ole Miss and compete for a job there." Going to compete for a job there. This is what the fourth or fifth DB that Ole Miss has taken in the portal this cycle. So we just talked about Trey Amos's fit. What do you like about Yam Banks, and do you think he kind of fits that similar role as Trey Amos, or do you think he can do more, or do you think he's more of a depth piece?
I think he's a really good player. He's a 4 star on 24/7 transfer portal for a good reason. He's played a lot of football um at South Alabama. He played pretty darn well at times. He's kind of pretty versatile. To me, I see Trey Amos as more of like a, outside guy. Maybe can play some inside. Ian Banks to me is more of a slot corner, slash box safety kind of dude. They got to stick his nose up in some coverage and some tackling. He does miss a couple tackles for sure. His missed tackle percentage on PFF is a little bit higher than you'd like it to be. Just over 22%. But yeah, he's pretty good. I do like this. I don't think it's game breaking, similar to Trey Amos, but hey, this is a really nice complementary piece to fit with a bunch of their dudes they're bringing in. They're bringing in some pretty different bodies that do different things, and I think for Pete Golding, who likes to get frisky, who likes to blitz and do some things with his front seven, and to put his secondary on islands in some tough spots, and I think this is another piece that lets them do similar things to that.
Yeah, I think this is like heard Ryan Poles talking about this a couple years ago. They needed offensive linemen, so they drafted what 4 in the late rounds, the Chicago Bears, and they ended up hitting on Braxton Jones,
Hmm.
right? So it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. right? Pete Golding knows that he has to have a good secondary for his defense to be effective because he's going to be putting him on island. To me, this is another dart that he's throwing. Who knows? I don't know that this will work out. I don't know. I think he's good enough. Yeah, makes us talented enough where this could work out. But if all else, this is a good depth piece. He might transfer out of there in the spring. I have no idea because he's a grad transfer.
I believe so. Let me double check his year. Yeah, I guess so. He just graduated.
Yeah. So also, we haven't mentioned it yet. Obviously, all name team
Oh
Yam
yeah,
Banks.
Yam Banks. Are you kidding me? That's
Come
awesome.
on.
Especially a guy that's 6'1", 208 that can just stick you. That's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah, I do think real quick to add to that, Yam Banks. Yeah, just the Ole Miss secondary in general, right? They bring in a couple guys, Amorant Walker, Brandon Turridge. You mentioned throwing darts at a dartboard. I will say I do like that analogy, but I do think that Yam Banks and Amos are a little bit different than just a couple of late day three offensive linemen with some traits, right? Not quite like the Ryan Pulses thing like that, but yeah, I do think he's a pretty solid player, and I don't think it's gonna be like, hey, he's the reason you're losing some games down the stretch in big time SEC plays. I think he can make some plays for you.
Let's talk about Jaheim Thomas, linebacker at Arkansas, who I thought was pretty good. I thought he was pretty good. Going over to Wisconsin, a team that I think needs linebackers pretty bad. I think they need a lot of help on that defense, more so than I think fans will key you in on. Now, linebacker isn't a position like quarterback where if Wisconsin had landed a more elite quarterback than they did, sorry, TBD, you'd be scared, right? And he was a Minnesota fan. So what is this move? Does this move the needle for you at all? A little bit? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I think he's I think he's a good player in terms of moving the needle. He's an off-ball linebacker, right? He's played a bunch of college football. That's important.
Right.
That's important. We talked about this a lot of times. We're breaking down teams and we're going through the linebacker depth chart. It's like, oh, they played a lot of college football. That's important. Like, yes, now it doesn't. He's 6'4", 240, kind of big dude, and
It does
whatnot.
not mean everything though. Experience does not mean everything.
No, but I do think like it's better than sometimes it's better than nothing. Yeah,
Okay, well,
to
is
me this
Mariana Sori Marin better than nothing?
he's a fucking bozo. But this is not Marlon Sorry Marin. This is Jaheim Thomas. All right. I have to poop on him a little bit. But yeah, no, the Jaheim Thomas for Wisconsin is bringing in a linebacker room that brings back talented transfer from the Midwest, Sebastian Cheeks, a guy that was very highly rated. First, another
You
all
got
named
Yam
guy, another all
Banks,
another
Sebastian
all
Cheeks. I mean, we're just
another
unreal today. This is awesome.
another all-name guy, four-star guy from Evanston, Illinois. He's coming back to the Midwest and play for Madison. And then Tackett Curtis, a guy that USC fans know pretty well. Recruiting guys know him pretty well. Played a bunch as a true freshman last year. Talented guy as well. So it's a crowded room with a little bit of experience, a little bit of traits. And I think he's kind of the middle thing where like he's got a bunch of experience, but not a ton of traits and whatnot, or I guess in terms of production. So we'll see. I thought he got better every year. His best year was last year at Cincinnati. He kind of regressed a little bit this year for Arkansas. And obviously he was trying to replace a guy like Drew Sanders and Bumper Pool, which is not easy. That Arkansas team had a lot of problems. It was not just Jaheim Thomas. Okay, I'm not going to paint the picture. It was all on him. So I think he can see a little bit of resurgence at Wisconsin for sure. But I don't have I guess game breaking expectations for him, nor should I. I think it's a little unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm in the exact same boat as you. Doesn't move the needle for me in terms of like positional value. Like, sorry, that sounded harsh. I don't mean this doesn't move the needle for me. Like, this is a bad take. This is not a bad take by Wisconsin at all. They
Yeah,
need help at
yeah.
linebacker. I think Jaheim Thomas will help them with that, right? It just doesn't, it wouldn't scare me as a Minnesota fan, an Iowa fan, an Illinois fan, right? Just because, he's not a big name guy. He's not gonna break the game. But
Yeah,
this is a good player, a good add. If you can add a guy like this, I mean, look, I'm a Texas A&M fan. All right, viewers watching this didn't know this. Next year, our linebacker depth is going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting and a lot of inexperience. So Would I have taken a guy like Jaheim Thomas on Texas A&M Aggies? Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. So this will be a good guy for Wisconsin. I anticipate that he starts. I anticipate he starts.
Yeah, and also we talked about it before. Like there are times where like your linebackers can get exposed sometimes with the RPO, late in the seasons with depth, injuries, all that other good stuff. You mentioned this is a great take. This is a great take. This is a great take. A lot of teams need a guy like him with experience, an off-ball linebacker, playing big time football. Yeah, all the things you said. Yes, just because we're not jumping up and down, I do think in terms of like I'm not nervous about it. I don't think it's gonna quite change the game for Wisconsin and make them a college football playoff contender necessarily, but I do think like it gives them a huge security blanket and again at another position of need for them, which I think is obviously a pretty impressive get and turnaround by the staff.
Let's talk about arguably one of my favorite players in the portal. His name is Brandon Johnson. He played for Duke. He's headed to Oregon. Man, did I want him to be wearing an A&M jersey next year so bad. Granted, A&M's transfer portal class, especially in the secondary, looks really good, and we'll be talking about that in an episode coming up very soon. But Brandon Johnson is a, dare I say, elite nickel? Dare I say elite?
I'll let you. I'll allow it.
I think he's really good. I think Oregon gets immediately better from this, and this is not the only secondary take that they've had. Right, we're going to talk about another one here in a minute. This Oregon is for real right now. Oregon is for real, and they're headed to the Big Ten, and they are looking to do damage, and that is going to include Brandon Johnson. Guy's great in coverage. He's a great tackler. He comes flying downhill, creates turnovers, havoc, whatever you want. Brandon Johnson can do that. I like him a lot. A lot. Did I already say that? I like Brandon Johnson a lot.
Yeah, he is kind of criminally underrated. And I think part of that is due to his stature. He's only 5'10. He's listed at 5'10, 180. He plays bigger than that, though. He's probably even smaller than that, but he does play bigger than that. He sticks his nose, tackling, covering guys. Slot corner is a tough position to play, especially at a high level of college football. He did it. Mike Eckel's defenses put a lot of stress on him, specifically in his position, and he thrived there at Duke. I was hoping, I know you were hoping he would go to A&M because of the connection there with the staff and because of the needs they had in the secondary. Now they chose other directions. He ended up at Oregon, whether that was mutual or unmutual, or Oregon just a really good place to be. And they wanted Brandon Johnson bad, and they gave him a nice little package for it. And I think a lot of it could be true. With all that being said, yeah, I'm gonna echo what you say. He is fantastic. He is pretty underrated. I mean, 10, 24/7
Criminally
has him as
underrated.
he's a 3-star transfer. Now, yes, I get it. He only has probably 1 year of eligibility. Um, but he's a stud. He's a stud for Duke.
Yeah, I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure like Trey Amos and Yam Banks both have a higher rating than Brandon Johnson in the transfer portal.
Yep.
Depending on
Yep.
what
And
site you look at, I just think that's so criminal. I think that's so criminal.
Johnson's good. He played a little bit of outside corner. He played a little bit of free safety. He did box stuff. He did slot corner. Tremendous guy that you can have. Versatile player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean he
He
was better in 2022, right? If you want to argue that 2023 wasn't amazing, whatever. He was still very good. Okay. But 2022, 55 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 2 picks, a touchdown, 7 pass defenses, 2 forced fumbles. Man, man, man. I like him a
yeah.
lot. I think those are havoc stats. Those are havoc stats. Sacks,
He
forced fumbles, interceptions, pass defenses.
Yeah, he's the guy. If you're Will Howard and you're traveling to Eugene, Oregon, right next year, you have to know where he is on every play because he's been moving around. He's doing different things. He's fake blitzing. He's not blitzing. He's in zone. He's in man. Everything you want, he can do, and that's what makes him so dangerous and so versatile for a guy with that staff there.
I like this a lot. Just I like him a lot, man. I get that he regressed from last year, but I still think he's really good. I still think he's really good. Gives me huge Bryce Callahan vibes. Huge Bryce Callahan vibes.
Yeah, the only thing that has me like I guess questionable about it is like how hard did Elko push for him? Elko's a guy I really respect defensively, especially, and a guy that can identify talent and needs. And I think he obviously had a ton of respect for Brandon Johnson with the way he used him, right? So I wondered up why he didn't end up at A&M. Maybe Johnson just wanted a different fit. Maybe it was just not quite the.
Well, I would say, okay, look who has in that A&M defense, look who has played nickel for them in the past, right? Large, gigantic human beings that can absolutely eliminate any kind of slot receiver that's trying to block them in the run game, right?
Yeah, I guess
Brandon
so.
Johnson is not that. And you look at Mike Elko, the average height of the DBs that he recruited, like there are none under 6 feet tall. They average 6'2". You got some scraping 6'4", 6'3". Marcus Ratcliffe to Ricky Wright. I I think like he was there because he was there. You know, that's what Duke had. And he was preseason All ACC. He was All ACC. Was he first team defense, second team defense, uh, the previous season with Mike Elko. So Mike Elko was able to use him very effectively. I just think Mike Elko went in a different direction in terms of the size. Mike Elko is. I think some people think he's not being picky because of the amount of players that he's taken in the transfer portal, but he's also taken like guys that really fit his system. So, and we'll talk more about that later. But this is a good get for Oregon. Great get and a good fit for Brandon Johnson. Let's talk about another Oregon secondary commit, Kobe Savage. Kobe Savage, Jamar Muhammad, and Brandon Johnson, who we just talked about. Am I missing anyone? I probably am missing someone. That is a
Cam Alexander,
yep,
the cornerback from UTSA.
yep.
Stud.
Just wow, wow. I good gets. They got torn up by Michael Penix twice, and they said no, that will not happen again. Now Michael Penix will not be at Washington next year, but they said that will not happen again. So they just went to the portal, and they did what a lot of teams are doing right now. They're doing what Texas A&M is doing. They are doing what Ole Miss is doing in the secondary, and that's throwing darts at the dartboard and seeing if something sticks. Now, Kobe Savage is just a dartboard, right? Is he second team All Big 12, third team All Big 12? Kobe Savage is a good football player. Good football player. There were a lot of teams out there that I think were eyeing Kobe Savage right there with like Will Lee on that Kansas State defense. Very, very good football player. Very, very good football player. So, what are your thoughts on this get for Oregon?
Yeah, he's a little bit different than Brandon Johnson, a little bit bigger, 5'11", 210 pounds. He'll play all over. He can play free, he can play in the box, he can play slot corner. They didn't quite have him on the corner and the boundary and whatnot, which is fine because you have other guys like Jabbar Muhammad, like Cam Alexander, I guess even Brandon Johnson if you need to in a pinch. Split him out wide. He's a guy that's made some plays, had some nice interceptions in his career at Kansas State. And yeah, he's pretty darn good. I believe he has 2 years of eligibility left. Um, I will want to say it depending on his red shirts and whatnot, but regardless, though, yeah, this is a nice take and a really good get for Oregon, and a nice job by Kobe Savage for seeing a need in the secondary for Oregon and seeing a path to playing time and exposure and NIL and all that other good stuff, and he's filling it and gonna run with it. Yeah, you mentioned all Big 12 second team just a year ago. Pretty darn good guy. It's been coached well. You're seeing a lot of those guys at Kansas State. So in that secondary, end up at some pretty big time places. A&M, you mentioned, so Will Lee, right, and Kobe Savage going to Oregon, obviously. So yeah, good stuff all around here. Sucks for Kansas State, and I know Chris Kleiman and staff is missing out on him, but Kobe Savage, a damn good player.
Yeah. Let's talk about Kansas State for a second. You lose Will Lee. You lose Kobe Savage. They still have who's the edge that you really like?
Kelly Duke.
Yeah, he's still there, right?
I believe I mean, who knows his eligibility? To be honest, I'm pretty sure he's out, but I'm sure they'll figure out a way to get him back
That is
regardless.
a lot of losses on that defense, and then you also lose Will Howard. Now I like Avery Johnson. I do like Avery Johnson, but you lose what feels like kind of a decent load of talent there. I mean Cooper Beebe. I mean, I don't know. I think this one hurts K State. I think for sure. I think it hurts K State. And when it hurts K State, that's how you know that Oregon got something pretty good. That's how you know. So
Yeah,
I
and
I'm excited to see how that DB room. There's gonna be competition there. And it'll be interesting to see. I assume Kobe Savage will find his way onto the field, but who knows? Is this another one of those um Jalen Catalon situations where he's a stud, at Arkansas and transfers to Texas and just can't find his way on the field? I don't know. I have no idea. But we'll see how this turns out for Kobe Savage. I like the move. I like the competition that's gonna be there. Good move.
yeah. No, I like that. They got some young guys coming in as well. At the safety cornerback position, Aaron Flowers is a guy a lot of people are super high on at that safety spot. So I'm sure he'll compete with Kobe Savage and others for playing time. But like you mentioned, yeah, I think Kobe Savage finds his way on the field. He does some good things for Oregon, and obviously you mentioned that need. And they're tired of being picked apart by Michael Penix, and hey, they're going. They got to play Ryan Day a bunch of times. They're competing now in the Big Ten. USC's following them. They got some pretty good passing attacks that obviously, and guys that can play both, not only passing attacks, but also come up and play physical run style when you're playing, the Iowas, the Wisconsins of the world.
Let's talk about Zion Chris. I know for a fact that you like him a lot. You got to watch him live in person, so I'll let you start this off. What are your thoughts on him transferring from one, just transferring like, you know, he's a good football player. Like, what are your thoughts on him transferring? Specifically, what are your thoughts on him transferring to Houston with a new Willie Fritz over there at Houston?
Yeah, this was an underrated guy that went uncommitted for a while in the portal. And I thought Willie Fritz, when he went to Houston, I was waiting for Michael Pratt. I was waiting for some other things, dominoes to fall, and nobody was going there. And they ended up with Zion Chris, who I think is a great get. Zion Chris is still a young guy, just a freshman this past year. I believe he's a redshirt freshman, yeah, and he kind of did some frisky things. He was very, very tough to tackle against Minnesota when he came up to play us. Um, Once they started using his legs more and he took over, they had success and he played really, really well. Was not the full-time starting quarterback for them, but ended up winning that job. And I thought that Louisiana definitely gonna hurt missing him. He's a guy, I believe he's lefty. He's kind of frisky, and all that good stuff. Actually, maybe he's righty. I'm so sorry, but regardless of whatever it is, he was fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. Now it'll be a little bit interesting. It's a slightly different roster than it was last year. No Donovan Smith, but I'm talking about more along the lines of like receiver. It's gonna look different. No Matthew Golden at all. You thought, I mean, you had another guy underrated, Dalton Carnes, 20 receptions, 260 yards. He was a true freshman that got playing time. He's transferring out of there. I believe he's going to North Texas. Matthew Golden's going to uh, Texas at Austin. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on there. But you got some other pieces that I think you like at Houston. Willie Fritz is a great coach. It is interesting though, because I think some of those wide receivers got out of there because, excuse me, Willie Fritz isn't known for bringing in guys that love to throw the ball a ton. So don't blame some of those receivers for getting out of there when they could, seeing that there might be some opportunities at other programs to show off their talents. But Chris, he's a stud. I think he can elevate a team. Is he better than Donovan Smith though? That's the question. I thought Donovan Smith at times, notice said at times, played pretty okay last year.
Yeah, I don't know about better right away. He's also a guy, Donovan Smith's a guy that's been there forever in college football ranks, a ton of experience. Young Chris kind of got thrown into action, a little bit raw passing the football, but I think that running experience and that running ability gives you an added dimension in the offense that you mentioned with the physical nature of Willie Fritz's teams. I think it helps him. It gives you an extra body in the box to block and to account for that numbers mismatch. Obviously, that all these coaches are always loving to see for their O line. And so, yeah, I think this is frisky. Yes, there's a reason why he went uncommitted for a while because maybe the development wasn't there over the season. He's still pretty darn raw, but I think the tools are all there. He's got a cannon of a right arm, really, really speedy player, quick, hard to tackle, avoids sacks pretty darn well at times. It'll be about putting it together with a new staff this year, which won't be easy. Having a new offense coordinator and a whole new staff for a young guy to learn. But regardless, though, I think this is a great take by Houston, given what they could have done. I was hoping Minnesota would have dabbled their feet in the Zion Chris, and I think they did, by the way. PJ Fleck and staff were super, super impressed with him when he came up to see us. And they obviously, were trying to get him on campus to visit, and he ended up choosing a starting spot over maybe a backup or competition for Minnesota.
Enough Xander Chris talk. Let's talk about Derek Graham, offensive lineman. We haven't talked about a ton of offensive linemen in the portal, and I only wanted to bring this up because it's a little personal. He comes from Troy, 6'4", 305. He's okay. He's a pretty decent football player, and I got some questions on air the other day that were along the lines, like why isn't A&M going after surefire starters, right? And here's your answer. Derek Graham is almost as good as it gets in the portal, and he is not probably a starting caliber tackle in the SEC. He probably isn't. He'll compete for sure. He'll be nice depth. He can play guard. He can play tackle. I like him a lot. I like him a ton. And you know what, too? Like, he's got more experience than Chase Pasantis, and Chase Pasantis really struggled last year at tackle. Really struggled. Does A&M know what they're going to do at right guard necessarily? I think they have an idea, right? But what if all of a sudden Mark Nebeau is playing center and, instead of Bryce Foster, then who are you sliding in at guard right next to Nebeau? You got Cam Dewberry on one side. Who's going to be on the other side, right? Is it going to be Derek Graham? I don't know. He'll definitely have his chance to compete for sure. I like that he was on Troy. I think Troy is one of the more physical teams in the Sun Belt. So I think those practices, if there were any team that was going to get you ready to play in the SEC in the Sun Belt, it would probably be Troy, practicing at Troy every single day against the defensive line and a defensive front. So this is a good get. This is a good get for Texas A&M. I don't know what your thoughts are, but this is a good get.
Yeah, like you mentioned, like it is offensive tackle, it's offensive line. Giving a guy with experience and positional flexibility is good. Like that is good. That is good. A guy that you believe in has some tools to play pretty well. All the other good stuff. Yeah, it's not like Caden Proctor and those guys grow on trees. We've done Lance Hurd, another guy. Like those guys are one in a million. Those guys are not quite typical portal entrants for especially most of the country. And obviously A&M believes in themselves to acquire talent just about anybody they want to, but those guys were special circumstances that happened and whatnot. Derek Graham's a guy that's played a bunch of different positions on the line. In 2022, he was actually the sixth lineman for Troy in run blocking situations. So they moved him around, which is good. The flexibility that he has, and that showed off his athleticism and being able to do some good things there. Yeah, like you mentioned, O-line has been a need at A&M. And I think part of it just comes down to better coaching. And that sounds like they're going to get it because Steve Adazio was not a good coach, right? Developmenting, right? It sounds like that O-line took a step back just about every year he was there. And obviously injuries didn't help his case, and I get that. But regardless, though, this is a fine take for A&M. I think this is one of many needs they had this offseason, and him and a couple other guys they filled it with. And yet you're not going to get an all SEC guy to transfer to A&M. Okay, that's not going to happen anywhere, right? For the most part, like you have to go find these diamond in the roughs, these guys that you believe in their traits and their tools and experience. And with your coaching, your strength and conditioning, your scheme, they can thrive in. And that's what I think the staff did and identified with Derek Graham.
Yeah, and Adam Cushing has done more with less. Believe me, he has done more with less. So we'll see what their offensive line staff can do over there. What Colin Klein's gonna be able to do with Derek Graham. It'll be interesting. I'm excited to see. There's gonna be a ton of competition on the offensive line next year, and I love that. And Derek Graham's gonna add to that, so that's great. Last guy we're gonna be talking about today, Marcus Ratcliffe. Yes, talking about Marcus Ratcliffe. Who is he? He was a safety, defensive back for San Diego State this past season. Yeah, I know you're probably thinking in San Diego State, they stunk last year. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But you know what? As terrible as that defense was, every single fan said, well, at least we have Marcus Ratcliffe, right? True freshman. Was he 6'2, 6'3, versatile player, could play in the slot, in the box, whatever you need. As a true freshman, yeah, there were times that he got freshman. The same way Caleb Downs got absolutely bulldozed by that USF running back. He had his freshman moments. Marcus Ratcliffe is long, athletic, fast, physical. He's a very good football player. And I wanted to talk about him today because A&M took a ton of DBs, and I just might maybe think that Marcus Ratcliffe has a chance to really impact that program in the future as a member of the secondary. He might not start this year. He might not. I don't know. I mean, Bryce Anderson's right there in the nickel. You got Jacoby Matthews, who's had some experience playing there, who's also a really good talent. You got some guys. You bring in Ricky Wright, you bring in Donovan Sanders. I mean, there's some safeties there in that room that are pretty decent. So I'm not sure if he'll see the field right away, but boy, do I like Marcus Radcliffe a lot. When he flipped from UCLA to Texas A&M, I thought, wow, what a beautiful get. That was a guy that Mike Elko loved. We talked about it. DBs that are really tall and long, athletic and physical. Jalen Jones is an example of that he's had in the past. Antonio Johnson is an example that he's had of that in the past. And he's been really successful with guys like that. So those two are in the same recruiting class. So I like Marcus Radcliffe a lot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, credit to Marcus Radcliffe for, Danton Lynn heads over to USC, who he committed to at UCLA. And obviously, you consider opening up your recruitment and figuring out your transfer portal. And obviously, here comes Mike Elko calling you, and he's like, here's list A, B, and C. And like you mentioned, Antonio Johnson and others of what I've done with the position and a body like you. And I think he's going to thrive in a position like Mike Elko with what he can do with him. You mentioned slot corner, that the box safety, even free safety. He's got the length, and I think even versatility to do that at times, which he did at South San Diego State, which gives Mike Elko and staff even more opportunities and ways to use their guys. You mentioned all the talent they're bringing in. What I love about it is a lot of those guys do different things and bring different, specialties to the plate. Not only are they a mix of young and old guys with a lot of experience, sometimes no experience and whatnot. I think it was a very good blend of what Elko and staff did there. I think that was super incredible. And Radcliffe understands, like, hey, I'm gonna go here and compete with some of the best in that secondary, go up against elite wide receivers and some good ass tight ends and really be challenged in not only practice but also in the SEC. Yeah, this is an awesome fit. This is an awesome fit. I think both sides here are really, really happy with what they're going to end up. And yes, like you mentioned, he might not have 400 snaps this year, but hey, like 3 years down the line, like he could be a monster, a guy that everyone is looking out. Mel Kiper, all the NFL draft guys are like, hey, this guy right here, look at him down in College Station, right? He's a guy that NFL scouts are just drooling, waiting to get their hands on. You've seen the impact like Brian Branch had on Detroit this offseason, like nickel corner, slot corner, whatever you want to call it, box safety, star position. There's all this other good stuff. Like those guys, those bodies, those types don't come often a very around. And yeah, so it's this is nice. This is nice.
Hey Siri, could you clip that and remind me of this in 2 years? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. That is the end of our episode 57, off-season moves. transfer portal and coaching carousel. If you like the content, like the video, I know I've said it. You're probably annoyed that I said it, but it's a rule, man. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them, right? So make sure you're also subscribed as well. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow, give us a 5-star review. We enjoy our Spotify listeners. We enjoy our YouTube listeners. We keep growing. We keep loving it. Keep up the support. Guys, get excited. Get excited. Right? We're only like 200 some days away from college football, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's so far away. But look, we'll be here to cover everything that happens in the offseason. CD, you got anything before you head us out?
Yeah, like you mentioned, do all the things he said. Continue to support us. Let us know also in the comments if you want us to do anything fun this off season. I know we have a ton of topics and things we have to talk about, and we're excited to get to. So don't worry about us, lacking for content. This is college football, right? It's a 12-month thing. But also, if there's certain teams or moves or positions or questions you have regarding the future of college football in 2024 and beyond, let us know in the chat. Or if you want to review 2023 in general, we're doing some of those videos that we'll for sure get to. But if you have specific plays or teams and players and whatnot that you want us to review or talk about, let us know. Absolutely. We love hearing from you guys, and we'll see what we can do.
Absolutely. We will see you guys in the next one.